I was never one for camping outdoors. I always had more fun when I was sneaking into abandoned buildings with my friends and exploring all the nooks and crannies that we normally wouldn't be allowed in when it was opened up. And when I was younger, I wasn't afraid of anything. I mean, I would go exploring anywhere as long as I knew I wasn't facing jail time for breaking and entering. That all changed though as I got older, and though I can blame part of my newfound fear of certain abandoned buildings on my age and my getting wiser, the real source of my fear can be traced back to the summer of '98. I was 16 years old, and a group of friends decided that we wanted to spend the night in an old abandoned asylum that we had checked out a few times. We had only ever gone there during the daytime, and we were excited to see how eerie it would be at night. The four of us decided to get to the asylum by 4 in the afternoon so that we could cut through the property and sneak in through the unlocked door behind the kitchen and get everything set up before it was too dark. And it's a good thing that we planned ahead, because the door we typically used was jammed shut for some reason. We couldn't get it to budge. Honestly, at that point, we almost called it quits for 2 reasons. The first being that I wasn't willing to break a window to get in, and the other was that 2 of the people we were with, Allie and Dwayne, got freaked out because they thought someone must have been there if it was locked. Kellen was able to calm them down though, and it just so happened that I found a window that was opened up a bit, and we managed to open it up enough to climb through. Once we were inside, we headed into the auditorium, which was where we planned to set up our sleeping bags and leave our bags while we explored, and after setting up, we were off. Sadly, it wasn't long after we started walking around that things started to take a bit of a creepy turn. It wasn't apparent at first, but eventually we realized that we were not alone in that asylum. It started after we made our way through the 2nd floor of the asylum, which was 3 stories tall. We were only able to go into and check out 2 of the rooms on that floor because the rest had doors that couldn't be opened for some reason. So we moved onto the 3rd floor pretty quickly. But as soon as we stepped out the staircase and into the hallway, we all heard a slamming sound come from below us. We froze, and I remember slowly turning around to look at the door that we had just come out of. My heart was pounding as I listened closely to see if there was another sound similar to the one that we just heard. There wasn't anything though, but the single slam was enough to shake Kellen up, who was now practically begging to go back to the auditorium. We all agreed without any argument, but in order to make it to the auditorium, we had to cross the 2nd floor again, since the staircase that we were in had a door that was jammed closed on the 1st floor. The plan was originally to sprint through the hall and down the stairs, but that all changed when we stepped into the 2nd floor hallway and saw that all of the doors had now been opened. We all looked at each other with confused looks on our faces, and before we could even think about what we were going to do, another sound cut through the silence like a knife through butter and sent us all into a panic. Coming out of one of the rooms farther down from us on the right of the hall, we heard something that sounded like feet shuffling across the floor. I took in a deep breath as I tried to muster the courage to speak and ask my friends what we should do, but any chance of me talking was interrupted by the sound of a man muttering to himself from the same room that we heard the shuffling. In unison, without saying a word, the 4 of us sprinted back into the staircase we had just emerged from and began running downstairs toward the door that was jammed shut. Now, I'm not sure if whoever was in that room knew we were in the asylum with them or not before we ran, but there was no doubt that he did afterward. As we made it to the bottom of the stairs, we were all terrified by the sound of a deep, incoherent scream that came from the same floor we had just run from. Dwayne and I both began to throw ourselves at the door that would lead us to the 1st floor of the asylum, but at first it wouldn't budge. It was like it had been rusted or corroded shut. That was when we heard it. The sound of whoever was screaming making their way into the staircase. We could hear the sound of footsteps coming from right above us. We all screamed and panicked, but thankfully at that moment, the door finally budged. Once it was opened enough for us to squeeze through, we all made it out of the staircase as fast as we could. There wasn't even a discussion about it. We all decided to just leave our sleeping bags and the few snacks that we had brought and just decided to run out of there as fast as we could. None of us bothered to look back to see if we were being followed, but after that day, I don't think any of the 4 of us have even considered going back into an asylum ever again. As a property manager and real estate agent, I'm always on the lookout for abandoned properties that can either be fixed up or rented out, or if I'm lucky, I'll find one that doesn't need much work and I can practically just resell it. And for a while, when I first started out in the business, I took a lot of information that wasn't actually substantiated by proof, which resulted in me buying some properties that proved to be pretty costly. So what I started doing before purchasing a property, instead of going and inspecting it by myself, I would always hire a professional building inspector to come with me so that I can learn all that I needed to know about the place. That being said, before I learned that lesson, I used to go in on my own to check out the potential properties, and one that I will never forget was an old abandoned asylum. I had originally planned to purchase it for the land and demo the entire structure before building off of it, but beforehand I wanted to get a better look at the property in person. So I showed up to this run-down brick building that was covered practically from top to bottom with graffiti. Even the parking lot was all tagged up. Surprisingly enough though, the front door had a security keypad on it that was still active, and because the current owner wasn't in town, they gave me the code and permission to walk around the property. I let myself inside, and as soon as I opened the door, I could smell a strong, rotting stench, and right away I knew that a sewage pipe must have burst or something. But that's nothing compared to what I was actually smelling. I slowly made my way into the abandoned asylum, breathing as little as I possibly could as to not take in that horrendous smell. And as I walked, right away I realized that the keypad I used to get inside must have either been new or just didn't work too well, because much like the outer walls of the building, the halls were covered in graffiti. As I made my way further into the asylum, I decided to pull out my phone and use the flashlight because of the lack of sunlight that was able to reach into the halls from the few rooms that had their doors open. I continued to try to ignore the smell, but as I made my way further into the building, it only got stronger. I figured that in no time I was going to be coming up on something really disgusting, but I never would have guessed that I would end up running out of there as if my life depended on it. I walked around the corner of one of the hallways and stopped dead in my tracks as I saw in big, dark, reddish-brown letters on the side of the wall in front of me that there was one word written: run. I got closer to the painting and noticed that it seemed to have a bit of a different texture or drying pattern than a lot of the other paint that was used on the other graffiti. But I just shrugged to myself and wrote it off as some kids being little anarchists. Little did I know that I might have been in imminent danger the longer that I stayed in that asylum. Continuing down the hall, I kept looking at all of the art, and before long I came across another message written in that same reddish-brown substance. Only this time it said, "He's close." I'll admit by that point I was feeling pretty nervous, but I still decided to continue on. Boy, do I wish I hadn't. You see, as I continued to walk around the asylum and check out the rooms, I could tell that I was getting close to that rancid smell, and to my surprise, it seemed like it was coming from an old patient's room that had its door wide open. I couldn't help myself. I had to see what was making that stench. I peeked my head into the room, and what I saw almost made me vomit on the spot. Laying in the corner of the room was a partially decomposed body that had been left to rot. I stepped away from the room and tried to gather my thoughts before I had a full-blown panic attack, and that was when I heard it. To this day, I don't know exactly what the noise was, but to me, it sounded like a door opening and closing from down the hallways in the direction that I'd been heading toward when I found the body. As fast as I could, I turned around and began running full speed down the hallway that I came from and toward the exit. As I made my way out of the front door, I immediately called the police. They told me to wait in my car until they arrived, and I told them that I would wait for them outside the gate to the parking lot. After they arrived, the police went in and confirmed that there was a body in the room, and after they recovered it, they told me that they would reach out with any information. According to their reports, the body belonged to a patient that must have hid there when it was abandoned over 7 years before. To this day, though, I still don't know what that opening door sound was, but something tells me that there was more to that story than what I was told by the officers. Staying in an abandoned asylum overnight might seem like a weird thing to do in your pastime, but the mixture of fear, adrenaline, and the memories that you will make is what makes it all worth it. Well, for the most part. Sometimes the memories that you end up making are ones that you wish would just leave your mind altogether. For instance, I'll never be able to actually sleep during my overnight urban outings ever again because of something that happened back when my brother and I were only 14 years old. The two of us and one of our friends wanted to have a sleepover, but none of our parents wanted to have any company over that weekend, So we decided to spend the night at the asylum that had been abandoned more than 20 years ago. Kids had been staying there for years, and we knew that it wasn't super dangerous, but it was still creepy enough to make it fun. And that's even after we had gone there literally countless times before that. However, the fact that we had gone so many times before was the reason why we knew something was wrong that last time we decided to stay the night. You see, we showed up in the middle of the day and hung out in the field out back for a while before making our way inside. And by that point, it was clear that we were the only group of kids that were hanging out there that day, which was pretty normal. But as we were walking through the field toward the building where we were able to gain access to the asylum, we noticed something that we had never seen before. There was someone that none of us recognized standing in the side parking lot of the asylum. We tried not to pay him any mind, but we noticed as we got closer to the building, he started walking toward us. At first, we thought it might be a new security guard or something, even though we had never seen one there before, so we decided that it might be smart to hide. As soon as we got inside the asylum, we all took off and ran straight toward the old laundry room. We knew that we could squeeze ourselves behind the washing machines and hide for a bit until whoever was out there left. I'm glad we chose the spot too, because about 2 minutes after we had all hidden, we heard the unmistakable sound of someone walking through the hallway right past the laundry room. We don't know who they were, but for some reason they were looking for us. The three of us waited for what felt like forever, but was really only about 20 minutes before we finally decided that it was probably safe to come out. And thankfully when we did, that man was nowhere to be found. For the next couple of hours, we were all very cautious and quiet while we hung out, just in case they came back. However, by the time it was about 11 p.m., we had all but forgotten about the stranger and ended up actually falling asleep pretty easily. It wasn't until another hour or so later that I woke up with a really uneasy feeling in my stomach. Something was wrong. I just didn't know what. I slowly sat up on the floor that I had fallen asleep on and began to slowly look around. And I froze as I looked over to one of the windows in the room that we were staying in, and I saw the silhouette of a man standing and staring right inside at us. I couldn't contain myself as I let out a loud scream that not only woke up my brother and our friend, but also let the man know that I saw him. He took off running away from the window, but by then it was too late. We had all seen him and were quickly getting ready to run as fast as we could. It was as we made our way down the hallway that we heard the door on the other side of the hallway close, and as we turned to look back in the direction that the sound came from, we could clearly see the strange man walking toward us. We took off as fast as we could and started running toward the exit. We made it out of the building but weren't sure if we were still being followed or not, so we just kept running. The three of us probably made it about a mile down the road before we felt safe enough to slow down a bit and catch our breath. And when it seemed like no one was following us, we finally felt safe. That night we all ended up back at my house and we had to sneak our friend out in the morning. But as far as we were concerned, anything was better than sleeping in that asylum that night.